Hi, this is Kathy from Gadget Stop 321, and in today's video, I'm going to be taking a look at my new pen, a Kaweco Art Sport. I got the Hickory model with a double broad nib, and if you hang around to the end of the video, I'll talk about how I ended up getting another Kaweco. I ordered this from a pen store in the UK, and I'll put the name of it here on the screen. It's a place I had never ordered from before. The pen was on back order, but it really didn't take much longer to receive it than it would have if I had ordered from one of the pen stores on the East Coast of the United States or from Japan, both of which take a little bit longer than if I order from someplace here like Van Ness. I usually get stuff pretty quickly from them. But you get the sticker and the little pamphlet with the history and everything that you always get with Kawecos. You get your standard Kaweco 10. And I remember when I got my first Kaweco Skyline Sport, you know, I knew it was a small pocket pen, but I was kind of surprised by how small it was in person. Well, it's been about a year since I used a Kaweco Sport. I sold my AL Sport last year at the St. Louis Pen Show, so it's been just under a year. And again, I'm surprised at how small these pens are in real life. This material is just beautiful. I ended up getting the brown, the hickory material. I love brown pens because I feel like you can put any color ink in them and, you know, they just look beautiful. I actually liked the look of the terrazzo better. I think that's a beautiful pen as well. But I was a little bit worried about having a section with white. I was just worried about it getting stained. I feel like it's a little less likely to get stained since most people refill a cartridge, but if I ever decided to use the little Kaweco converter, I would just be scared of dipping a section that has white in it in ink. I've got my cartridge here that I may end up using one of these blue cartridges. I think blue would look good with this brown material. I also noticed that on the section threads here, I need a white background. Let me see. The threads don't go all the way up to the end of the section there, so it looks like there's a space there to put an O-ring. I've always said I'm not really interested in eyedropper filling a pen, but this might be one that I would consider that. I don't know. We'll see. The threads are really smooth. Now, this section, it's smaller than I remember, and that tiny little nib, that is just so small. I got my start in fountain pens, like I said, using a Kaweco Sport. That was a Kaweco Skyline Sport was the first fountain pen that I bought for myself, and I used it quite a bit as a teacher. Then I kind of graduated to pilot pens, but still I used the pilot pens that have the number 5 size nibs. But recently I've been using a lot of pens that have number 6 size Jowo and Schmidt nibs. And so going back to these little small nibs, it's kind of almost shocking how small they are. I don't remember it being this small. You can see how small my hands are. I can use a Kaweco Sport unposted, and a lot of times I did as a teacher because I was marking up papers. I would write a little bit, and then I would just hold the cap in my hand and kind of use it like a desk pen, a holder for a desk pen, and then take it out when I needed it. But I noticed watching people's reviews online that the Art Sport post a little bit deeper and a little bit nicer than the Skyline Sports and the Classic Sports, the less expensive pens. And the reason that is the less expensive sports and even the other sport models have cap liners. So when you're posting it, you hit that cap liner, then you have to give it just a little extra push to get it to post. Well, since these art sports don't have the cap liner, it posts a little bit deeper and you don't have to push it down. You just barely post it and it sticks. It creates a little bit of a vacuum in there that holds it. So in addition to the friction, you've got a little bit of a vacuum there holding the cap on. Another difference in this art sport, and one of the things that really attracted me to this one, is the incorporated clip. You don't have to buy an additional clip. Now, I'm not someone who uses a clip very much, but I just kind of like the look of this clip. It looks really nice with the rest of this pen. I noticed that when the piston fillers started coming out, I really liked the look of the kind of vintage style pen with this style of cap and just the overall look of the pen. I really like that. Another thing I'm going to have to watch for is, where does my grip settle on this? The section is not tremendously large, especially compared to the pens I've been using. I've been using larger pens, so I notice the more narrowness of this. With this nib being shorter, I might actually grip it up here. We'll just see where my grip settles as I do some extended writing with this pen. I don't have it inked up yet. I'm going to dip test this double broad nib with some Herbon Cacao de Brazil. And I just picked this because I figured it would be it would be easier to clean out of the nib since I'm just dip testing this one. I'm going to dip test this double broad. And I already had a double broad replacement nib that I bought for my Lilliput. I'm going to compare both of these and see how similar they are. The broad and the double broad that I already have are very similar. They're almost indistinguishable between each other. The way I can tell them apart, other than just looking at what's stamped on them, is that my broad nib writes really nicely in reverse. But the double broad is really dry and doesn't really want to write in reverse. So I went ahead and got another double broad because I have the whole line of replacement nibs from the extra fine to the double broad. I don't have a stub nib. I don't use stub nibs a lot. So I went ahead and got another double broad. And if this one, or whichever one is the nicest, I'll keep it the way it is. And when I go to the St. Louis Pen Show, I'm wanting to get a custom grind on one of them. I've discovered a nib grind that I really like when I went to the Arkansas Pen Show. And I want to get one on one of my Kaweco nibs. So I'm going to go ahead and dip test this. I wanted to go ahead, let me grab a flashlight. I want to make sure that there's not a cap liner in there. I'm not 100% sure. I would say I'm about 90% sure. I think what I'm seeing down there is just the threads. They look a little whiter than the rest of the actual material, but I think it's just because they're not polished that it just looks lighter because it's, the raw material unpolished. Let me see. There does also appear to be, it's hard to tell with, okay, let me see if I can hold this. It looks like there's a step. Yeah, there's a step carved into the cap of the material so that the end of the section here meets up with that step to create kind of a seal instead of having a cap liner. So that's nice. That's a nice feature. I'm less concerned about the nib drying out. And okay, so I'm gonna get my Hobonichi that I do my writing samples in, get that out here and dip test a couple of these nibs. I'm trying to show how you can see the ink getting drawn up into the nib slip, but it happens so fast by the time I get it held up horizontally, it's already drawn up into the nib. So the nib's already soaked up quite a bit of ink. Let's see if this is enough to write with. This is very smooth. I would call it glassy smooth. Has a little bit of stubbiness to it. The side strokes are just ever so slightly more narrow than the vertical strokes. Nice and wet. Let's see what the reverse writing looks like. It's a little scratchy, but that's something that can be corrected. It looks like it puts down enough ink. It's not wanting to run dry. And everything felt nice except, I don't know if you can hear that, to the right was kind of scratchy. Now, the regular writing, like I said, was just glassy smooth. So it's not that the tines are misaligned or anything. It's just that you could do a little smoothing with some micro mesh if reverse writing was something that you're interested in. You can see that's wet enough that for an extra fine line like this, that's plenty of ink to write nice and uniformly. All right, so I think this double broad on this one is the keeper. Let's compare it to the double broad nib that I have on my Lilliput. All right, so this is also a double broad. It's just one that I already had in my collection. I bought it as a replacement to use in my Lilliput. Well, look at that. It should be... All right, it had some trouble grabbing the paper. Let me see if I can, if it'll, yeah, it'll keep writing. That's interesting that it had trouble grabbing the paper after I had dipped it. Now my scribble does look a little more faint than this scribble up here. This one also has a little bit of stubbiness to it, but it feels and looks like it's writing a bit drier. Let's see. The ink smear may be a bit drier. Yeah, but I don't know if it'll show up on camera. But it looks just a hair drier. And yeah, this was one that yeah, I never could get it to reverse right. So this will be the one I will have ground into get a custom grind on it by a Nibmeister. Let me see if I dip it one more time. Maybe it just wasn't as saturated as the other one. Let's give it one more try. Do one more scribble. Well, now that looks a bit more like the original one. Okay. And let me try reverse one more time. Nope. Okay. All right. The reason I decided to pick up this art sport, number one, I saw someone, or I've seen several people showing the videos of their terrazzo model. And even though I really liked that one, it was just the style of the pen itself that really got me thinking. I've got all these replacement nibs that are really nice writers that the only thing I use them for is testing ink. The only Kaweco I still have is my black aluminum Lilliput, and I just use it for ink testing. I enjoy using it for ink testing, but using it for, you know, an everyday carry fountain pen, I'm just not that interested in it. I had a brass Lilliput, and last year at the pen show, I put the brass Lilliput and this one out on my table for sale, and I had decided whichever one sells first, I'll keep the other one to use, mostly for ink testing, but, you know, maybe if I wanted to use it for writing. Well, obviously the brass was the one that sold, and I was a little bit disappointed. I was hoping this one would have sold. I priced it much cheaper, but the Lilliput just never really did work out for me that well for long writing. Let me compare the two sections. Okay. You can see there's a bit of difference between the two. It may not look like that much of a difference, but you can really feel it. This is more like, okay, you see how much of a gap I have between my fingers when I push these two as far down as I can. This feels more like writing with a number 2 pencil. Yeah, when you compare the two, you can really feel the difference. I've got a bit more space up here. Now, I don't always write like this. My fingers will adjust as I write. I tend to put my pointer finger more directly on top, but this does feel much better. And especially, I just like the feel of resin over metal. Now, this one doesn't feel too bad. I don't know if it's whatever the coating there is on it, or maybe it's just because it's so small. My fingers don't have room to slide around. The brass, I prefer the feel of brass over other metals, but I prefer plastic, and especially, you know, this type of resin. It's just more grippy and it just feels nicer. And I love the look of this material with the gold hardware. That's really nice. And like I mentioned, I might try eyedropper filling. We'll see how the refilling cartridges works out. I just watched a video on Goulet Pens, a short demonstrating how to use a glue gun to plug up a cartridge. You know, fill a couple of them at a time and use a glue gun to plug it up. I might give that a try. I've got a bunch of little plastic baggies that different pen supplies have come in. I could fill up a few cartridges and put them in one of those baggies and test out how that hot glue holds. But I'm really excited about using this pen. Now, I'm not a broad nib kind of person. I'm going to remove this nib and put in my 14 karat fine nib for now. I've been using my Pilot E95S with one of my new Birmingham pen inks, that Jasper Vein, and it has just been so enjoyable to write with in this pen. I'm not usually one to put a brown ink in a brown pen, but that ink is just so enjoyable to write with. I've got to see if it's going to work out in that fine nib. I'm going to try dipping it first. I'm going to go ahead, even though this isn't the old one, I'm going to mark that this was the old nib. This is, I don't know, I could become a broad nib writer. I don't know, I always say that. I enjoy playing with my ink with broad nibs and stub nibs, but when it comes to writing, I prefer my fine nibs. Here's Jasper Vein. I considered selling or attempting to sell this gold nib, and I may have had it for sale. I'm glad at the pen show last year, but I'm glad I held on to it. Let me see. I considered getting a Skyline, or not a Skyline Sport, a collector's sport. There's that apricot, kind of pearly apricot. The threads were a little wonky on that one, but not too bad. It didn't feel like it was cross-threading. It just felt a little tight. That I considered getting the, I don't think it's called apricot pearl, but it's that pearlescent apricot color collector's sport that's out right now. That's a really pretty one. But the only deal is they don't have threaded sections. You have to actually pull the nib out of these nib sections and push them in. I wasn't really crazy about that. If they had had threaded sections, I would have either gotten that one or the little purple sparkly Hello Kitty sport. Either of those I kind of liked. Okay. Yep, this is Jasper Vein. I'm on my second fill of Jasper Vein in the E95S, and it is, I think it's almost used up. Of course, it's hard to tell. You can't see how much ink is in your converter. I've got the actual converter. If most people refill cartridges in the E95S, so you can kind of see how much ink you have, but I've got the converter in there. This one is the 14 karat fine nib. You can get these, I don't know if you can get them in rhodium plated, but I know you can get them in the two-tone gold and rhodium plated. Those are really pretty. All right, let's see if I got this saturated enough. I don't know, I might have to re-dip it. This ink does look really good with this material. Let Let me try this one more time. Looks like it needs a little more ink. That looks like that might be about as saturated as it can get. Okay, I want to compare this to my E95S. I had this pen up for sale last year, and I was kind of happy when it didn't sell, but then I hadn't used it all year until I got this Jasper Vein, and I have just enjoyed writing with it so much. You can see how much more ink this nib is putting down, and it's a fine nib also. Well, it doesn't look to be putting down tremendously more ink. Let me try this one more time. Well, that one looks quite a bit wetter. I think I just smeared it at a weird angle. But like I said, this one is completely inked up. It's got a converter in there. We will see if it makes a difference. One thing I found, though, with Kaweco converters and cartridges, actually, cartridges, in my experience, tend to perform a little bit better than the converter. The converter is so small and you have such a small amount of ink that if it's an ink with a high surface tension, it can get stuck in the back of that converter and not want to flow down to the nib, and you'll get some skipping. Using white lightning or another type of lubricant, just a pinpoint of dish soap can, loosen up that surface tension, but then you get more bleeding. So you lose some of the, nice characteristics of your ink when you do that. Yeah, I really like that dark, rich color when you're putting down lots of ink. But I'll do some experimenting. Yeah, and I may just not have the nib saturated enough. Whenever I do my writing samples, I do lots of writing samples ahead of time and do lots of dipping in between to really get the nib saturated before I do the writing sample on video. I'm just going to have to play with this a little bit more. Now, another thing, whenever I had my, what was it called? The Espresso AL Sport, Golden Espresso. That's the last Kaweco Sport that I had. I bought a rickshaw pen sleeve to go specifically with it, and I was worried that this clip would make it too big, make it too tight of a fit, but it fits perfectly. So now I won't be worried about carrying this in my pocket. One of the things I looked forward to when I decided to get this pen is to be able to carry a pen in my pocket again and to have one always with me, and because I always have notebooks in my purse and I don't always have my purse with me. I'd like to be able to carry a little pocket notebook. So I'm excited about that. Let me see, what else was there? One of the things I noticed on my original Skyline Sport, I don't know, the plastic of those, I don't know how to describe it. feels almost soft. I don't know if it technically is, but I noticed over time as I used it, right around in here, there were just I don't even know if you would call it micro scratches. There were just scratches from removing the cap. At first I thought it was scratches from posting the pin, but I checked, it was more where the cap was rubbing when you were unthreading it. I never had any trouble with scratches from posting with the plastic sport, just those from, you know, uncapping it. I was worried about maybe getting scratches with my AL sport from posting it, and I always posted it so gently. But I did notice that inside the cap there was in addition to the cap liner, there was a little plastic ring to keep the cap from scratching the barrel when you posted it. So that was nice. But I was very, very concerned about capping it or posting it very much. But with this one, the nice thing about this type of resin is if you do get some little scratches, you can just get some polishing compound or a polishing cloth and kind of buff those out. So that's kind of nice. Now the cap, there's no cap ring or anything, and this does feel pretty thin, but fortunately to cap it, you don't really have to push it down on there. I mean, you just barely have to set it on there, and it tends to hold. All right, I'm really excited about this. Okay, I was just getting everything ready to put away, and I decided to take the little liner out of the tin and just see if my replacement nibs would fit in there. I thought, oh, they probably won't. But they do. Isn't that awesome? I am so happy about this. If you found this video helpful, please give me a thumbs up, and if you'd like to see more videos like this, please subscribe to my channel.